Wonderful. So first and foremost, welcome. My name is Megan, for anyone that's new. I'm so glad you're here. I'm based in Fairfield, Vermont, enjoying and so grateful for this warm summer weather and to be here tonight with you. So thank you for being here. Tonight's class is going to be focused on our sea glass theme. So we'll be doing lots of different sizes and pieces and shapes of sea glass, really just to encompass. One of the things that I see from an inspiration like this is the characteristics of sea glass. It's incredibly beautiful. There's those light and dark tones, and they're all different shapes and sizes and the colors. And I don't know about you all, but it's always like a little surprise when you find sea glass. So we're all going to create our own collection of sea glass together. So put on some ocean waves, put on some nice relaxing music, and we'll all kind of walk the beach together. How about that? A few supplies that you'll need for tonight's class. You'll need a cup of water to rinse your brushes, a small plate to mix colors, and a paper towel. You likely have a canvas or canvas board. I am painting on canvas, I'm painting on paper tonight. So sometimes in my classes I paint on paper because it's a nice texture and it takes up less space, but I am using 11 by 14. So any size paper or any size canvas board that you wish, you have in front of you. For your colors tonight, you can choose the colors, but I'm going with a blue and a green theme. I have a cobalt blue that I'm using and a teal, like aquamarine. And I have a white paint and a black paint. And I'm using just a basic acrylic paint. At any point during tonight's class, if you ever have questions on supplies, like specifically what I'm using, I'm always here to be a resource for you to answer any questions about supplies. So do not hesitate to ask. I did post the inspiration in the chat window. Amanda, if you can't see it, please let me know. You can unmute or you can use the chat window in itself. Besides that, I will pause. If there's any questions, please let me know, but we'll go ahead and jump in and get started. All right. So a pencil was optional for tonight's class. I'm thinking, ladies and gents, that I may not use it, so no problems there. So what we're going to do is we're first going to start out, if anybody's interested in putting on a little bit of tape for their inspiration, you can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to frame out. So there's like an inch of kind of white border around the picture. So I always like to start out, you can do horizontal or vertical. It just kind of gives me a little bit of a frame. And I might just use the full inch of the tape here just to create this outline. So I'm just going to do it really nice and simple. At least I've been playing, one of the things about art is, playing around with new things and using a little tape sometimes to kind of create a little bit of a white border. I don't know, I kind of like doing that sometimes. So it's always fun to do that. If you don't want to do the tape, you don't have to. This is a little bit of painter's tape. Masking tape will work. It won't stick as well, but it will still work if you wanted to try that. So I'm doing I'm going right down to the bottom. And then I'm going to do the vertical. Just want a little bit of a white edge, a true white edge. Now, when you paint something with a white background, for in the future, you could always paint the whole canvas white first. A lot of artists do that. I didn't do that in tonight's class because of timing. However, in the future, if you ever want to paint, you can always do a full coat of white first as an option. Sometimes you'll get a different texture. It'll give you sometimes a better base based on what you're looking to accomplish. So feel free to consider that in the future. There's different mediums you can use, but standard white paint always works if you want to keep it simple. Look at that beautiful frame. So in the inspiration, you can determine how many pieces you want. So I'm really just going to jump in and I'll walk through some of the basic fundamentals of tonight's painting. So if you look at the inspiration I included in the chat window, all the pieces are are all over and gently placed, and there's white space in between each object. And they aren't pure rows of like from the left to the right going across. It isn't a grid. They're kind of scattered all over. So what we're going to do to start as our first exercise is I'm going to mix a light blue color as a starting point, and I'll mix it over here with you. So feel free to mix a lighter tone. So if you're doing blues and greens like me, or teals, you can follow along, but I'm going to mix a light blue, and we're just going to start placing objects. We're going to start doing basic forms of our stones. But we're going to do them in all different places. And this is where you set the tone on how big or how small these are. Now, in the inspiration, as we're all mixing colors together, we're going to have a little chat. So in the inspiration, there is a lot of stones across the top. So if I count the number of stones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Imagine how dense you want this to be. So there are actually 10 stones across the top. It's a lot of stones. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, and maybe I'll say I'm going to do 8 stones roughly, all over. So I want you to start in the top left-hand corner and make a stone shape of your choice. It does not have to be perfect. You can start by determining what you want the size to be. And it can be a solid color to start. That's fine. I'm going to teach you a couple tricks. So some of this might be advanced. So if you don't want to try any of these more advanced tricks, you don't have to. But on my palette, I'm going to get some extra creativity happening. So look at this. I have a light blue down here. I'm going to put a little bit of dark blue and a tiny touch of white. And I'll show you my palette. So here's my dark blue. Here's my light blue, and here's my little bit of my white. Okay, this is what Bob Ross would do. He'd have all the colors ready to go. So what you could do is if you wanted to take a little bit of this light blue or the darker blue and kind of touch up the edges just a little bit, and you can, if your paint is wet, you can kind of blend it along the top edge. This is basically inspiration of what we're doing. I'm kind of outlining it a little bit. See how it kind of has 2 tones? It's kind of neat, right? So do one rock. Then I want you to just to move over a little bit, and you can come down, and I'm going to do another rock. And this rock is going to be a different shape. You can use your lighter colors. Maybe you get a little bit of white. Try doing different tones of blues. A little bit of white. But this is the key. You need to have space in between these rocks. And you can play with the size, but come in and just do some general outlines. So some can be up, some can be down. Think of triangular shapes. Some of these are teardropped. Maybe this one will be a little bit rounded on one side. This is where we need to get a little busy and adding some shapes. So it could be a square. It could be, some of these stones, imagine that we're on a beach, and you can kind of play with your white, play with your lighter blues. You can fill them in a little bit as you go. Just know we're going to come back to these. Imagine when you're walking along the beach and there is all these different shapes. I remember the edges being kind of rounded and polished. We have a lot of coverage here. So this is where I want you to go at your own pace. Try doing some long, skinny ones. Some can be triangular. If you want to fill them in as you go, feel free, but just be mindful of how much time you spend on each one. So we're going to come in and bring them to life with a little bit of this darker blue, kind of like I did up there, but I wanted to give you an example of where we're going. The other thing is if you just do the outlines right now, having a little bit of white is going to be a good thing in the middle of some of these. But see how I'm keeping the white space in between. And I'm kind of staggering them. So change your shape, try a triangle, try a rounded square. Think natural, think of like a seashell, like a broken seashell. And come up with a consistent spacing. See how I have nice spacing? Some of these have teardrops, which is kind of fun. Kind of a rounded one. But I'm primarily using this light blue right here. I might grab a little bit of white. But you can do some tall, long ones like this. Watch this. There's a taller, longer, rounded. I always love finding the ones that were nice and rounded. You can do some smaller pebbles. Just about maintaining space and having creative shapes. So again, I might be inspired to come in and fill in a couple of these or do a little bit of the dark blue on some of the edges. However, I'm primarily focused on doing these shapes first. But look at the inspiration and get inspired a little bit. Some of these are longer, more tall. Some of these are more on a slant. Try to have the shapes be a little different around each other. And I have never done anything like this, so it's fun to try something new together. Art is about being courageous and trying new things, but having support when you need it. You can do some smaller ones. You can change the direction. Put a little one in, but again, maintain spacing as you work your way down. And I might incorporate some teal in here as well. Some of you might have done that. I might change like a couple of these colors to be teal. If you wanted to put a little teal on your plate, this is a great option. So if you have two tones, putting a little teal on your plate. I'm going to mix this teal with a little bit of white, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm putting a little dot of white next to my teal, just so I have like a teal and a white next to me, just in case if I need it. So I just grabbed another brush. Let's see. I'm just going to kind of mix these together. So I have a little bit of a lighter tone, but you can see I've left some of the darker tone, excuse me, right here next to it. So maybe I'll turn this one into a teal rock up here. Look how easy that is. If you've taken my classes before, you know you can paint over something you've already done. How brilliant. Maybe I'll turn this one over here that I haven't painted yet. This will be a teal rock. And I like to do a balance of alternative colors in different areas. So I might do a teal here. I might even have little pinches of teal in different areas as well. So like I might put a little teal in some of these blues just to get a little crazy. Doesn't matter, but those are the detailed work. But I want you to primarily focus on looking at the picture for inspiration and rounded edges. You can have some sharp edges too, but maintain that space. If you have that music on, enjoy the process. If you wanted some larger pieces, you could put in some larger pieces. Again, if you wanted to fill these in as you go, feel free. It's kind of fun to mix a little bit of white in as you go. In this inspiration, I'll walk you through the process so you can kind of get where we're going. We're going to do a lot of outlining first, and then we're going to slowly come back in and fill these in. Each of these rocks has light spots and dark spots. So imagine the amount of time we could spend here. So as we add these rocks in, I'm coming in with a little bit of light blue, even like a lighter blue, so more so white. And I'm just ever so slightly, you can just do a gentle outline on the inside. And you can see that that exterior line that you're painting now is really the edge. And we're kind of bringing our rock to life with some lighter interior. So we're going to get to that. So that's really a secondary step, but I'm showing it to you right now because sometimes people like to incorporate this as you go. So I want to make sure you know your options. And that's why I put some of the lighter on my canvas, on my palette now. So if I want to come in and add some lighter tones along the way, you could do that if you wanted to. But you can see I'm just gently working my way down. And I did some teals. So I'm thinking about how high rocks should be. I have some taller rectangular rocks. So what's going on in my head is rocks should be all different shapes and sizes. Long rectangles from a height perspective, smaller ones, and maintaining the white space. And we'll add this contrasting blue if you want to do that along the way. Again, we're going to do more of this. This will really your rocks will start to jump off the page by putting in a little bit of this contrasting blue here and there. So it's kind of like a little of the light blue on one edge, exterior edge. Artists always approach their paintings in different ways. So in these classes, I always like talking about it because each of you, I'm sure, are approaching this a little bit differently. But I'm here to help and answer questions and to guide us through. That's the fun part of these classes. I'm reminding you to add different shapes, rocks, you don't forget. And I'm reminding you to maintain the white space, right? All those important things that will allow these to look like little bits of sea glass. Oh, that's a little one, but I'll keep it. It's in my collection. And if you wanted to incorporate another color like this teal, I might incorporate a larger teal piece over here. And again, if you wanted to fill the interior with a little bit of the lighter, you could. And as you can see, I'm not filling the entire things in. I'm really, I'm doing it as more so an accent. So we'll be doing more depth. And as you're adding in these greens, you can see I'm trying to do it from a balanced perspective. So from the top to the bottom, to the left, to the right. See, I have a little bits of green kind of sprinkled into my blues. That's my intent with my art. So as you look at yours, think about what you might want your intent to be. Do you want to do all blues and greens? Do you want to do a solid mix? Some of you are probably doing a solid mix. I could see that. But again, focus on these shapes and the spaces in between. This one's going to be a little bit more rounded on the bottom. So I'm looking around. I have a tall one here. Maybe there's room for a long, skinny one over here. I always love finding the long, skinny sandwich styled rocks. And I'm putting a little bit of the lighter blue inside, maybe with a little bit of the line of the darker blue on top. Again, we'll do a lot more detailed work together, but we're just getting our basic shapes out. And if you have found any cool rocks, feel free to incorporate any of those characteristics into this art. But I would encourage you to try not to fill in. If you're doing some fill-in work, try to leave some of the centers of these, try to leave some a little bit more lighter in the middle. So I'm having a little fun kind of looping around, filling in some of these. And if I'm zooming, if some of you only have like 12 done, I'm not being a perfectionist with the edges of these, because I'm going to go back in and refine. These are all like base guided shapes. So you might be looking at mine and saying, Megan, you are like cruising and your rocks look fairly decent. Well, if I held this closer, you could see there's a lot of unfinished shapes here. So don't stress out if your edging is not perfect. We're going to come back to the actual edging of our rocks. But I am coming in again. I did a teal and I just grabbed a little bit of the white with my teal just to do a little bit of a fill in, but I'm keeping that nice and light. And I love this teal color. So much fun. And we'll be using the darker teal as an accent for the depth for the teal rocks. And you can even mix a little bit of blue with these teal rocks. We'll do that as one of our final steps of like actually kind of making them all look like they're related, fair say. But right now we're just getting those basic colors and basic shapes on. And again, if you wanted to put on any music, I'm using a little bit of the lighter blue inside of this blue just to kind of bring it to life as I go. And I'm using acrylic, which dries really quickly. So it's nice because we'll be able to do lots of more layered work. Using a little of the darker blue on the edges just to highlight the edge and the depth. And this is impressionistic, right? So you can kind of lean back in your chair and you can add some of the darker blue in areas if you're ready to do that. It's kind of fun. And if yours don't look like sea glass and it kind of looks like blue leopard, hey, that's kind of fun too. So don't be too hard on yourself with your creation tonight. The detailed work that we're going to do after is really going to make it look more like sea glass with some of the accents, but it's fun for you to incorporate these 3 tones of our colors along the way, if you wanted to. So some of the darker blues, you could do a couple touches on the left, on the bottom, a little bit on the bottom. This is what's going to bring our rocks to life, allow them to really jump off the page. And if you do something you don't like, don't worry about it. You can let it dry. You can always lighten something. But I'm maintaining space in between my rocks. That is what I'm going for. And I'm looking over here. I haven't had a long, skinny one in a little while. So maybe I'll just do a little one, a little rock right here. And I'll do a long, skinny one kind of coming in and down. So again, I'm kind of looking and examining each space for what it is. You could add a little blue on the top, down the corner. See what shapes you want to put in and where. And if you do a shape you don't like, white is our friend. It's our eraser in this instance. So you can always come in with a little bit of white, make any adjustments. So again, I'm going back and forth between a base color and then a little bit of the lighter color just to do a fill in around. And I'm kind of leaving some white space. So if you're stuck on kind of what rocks to put in where, you can come up and just start filling some of these in, keeping the white in the middle open. If you wanted to fill them in entirely, you could. That's absolutely fine. But you can see visually how when you have 2 tones of a color on a single object, you'll start to bring it to life. It will start to jump off the page. And that's why we do those exterior lines first, because you get to see they turn from small shapes into actual objects. In the picture, it's a lot lighter. Guess what? That's okay. We always can come back in with more white. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to come in and do a lot of final touches on these, but these are all base coats. So I am going to make these a little lighter. So don't hesitate to get some base paint on. And then we can soften them. Mine look like little gems. I don't know. They're kind of fun. Mine is very abstract in real life, by the way. It will come to life. I'm confident of it. But it's quite fun. So different size shapes. And take a couple deep breaths just to settle into the process. And if there's any questions along the way, please do not hesitate to ask. Again, look at the different shapes you have. And you might need to mix more light blue. I'm running out a little bit. You know when you're running out of light blue when your cobalt blue shows up more. So what you can do is you can just take a little dollop of white and put that right on your canvas, and then you can mix, or on your palette rather. And then you can just mix some more light blue. So it's really fun playing around with colors. Everybody does it in their own way, but you can see I use very little space on my palette. I have that cobalt blue here, and I've brought in some white, which I still have plenty of, and then I mix this little bit of this light blue here. So I can continue to use this, and oh, it's too dark. So I just mix some more of it, a little bit lighter of a tone. And I'm focused on doing different size, different shapes rocks. And all these rocks are fairly the same size. They're kind of the size of a quarter, roughly. Some of you might have smaller rocks. I might incorporate a few smaller rocks. Little pebbles kind of dabbled in. It's kind of fun. Again, I'm not being too critical of the edging of these rocks. I'm going to do that after. I'm sure some of you are trying to be really detail oriented with the exact shape of these. Keep it more lucid because we're going to change the shape and kind of dial it in a little bit as we go. Because we'll be bringing in white and they're going to change a little bit. All right, I think I'm going to, again, look at your secondary colors if anybody wants to add in. I'm going to do another teal down here. And again, I'm going to put a little bit of the uber light teal on the inside so it stands out. And again, I'm doing a trickle of the teal kind of in different spots. I might want to add more teal in. I can absolutely do that if I wanted to. So I'm going to be very thoughtful of where I put my next teal rock, or my sea glass rather. And you can use a little bit of the pure teal to do some edging. So again, that like the darker blue, you could always put a little bit of the edging of the teal on that. And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give is don't overthink it. Just be in the moment, get some of these basic shapes going. And you can let these evolve along the way. Again, that's why I wanted to show you it's okay to have other colors on your palette. You can fill these rocks in along the way if you wanted to. Again, everyone has a different process, and I am open to that and upfront in these classes. I would never want to force you to do something one way or another. The more you practice as an artist, you'll know you do what feels right. And I am here to help you figure out what feels right for you. And sometimes artists don't talk about that because they one, they're not given the space or told, but also they figure it out on their own eventually. But in these classes, it's important, especially if you like doing this. It's okay to know that your artwork doesn't have to be perfect. Mine is not, but I'm still having fun, right? It's about the process. It's about us being here together and you taking time for yourself. That is why we are here. We're also here to practice our skills. But I'm just gently taking a little break from down here. We have someone else joining. Welcome, Miss Terry.
Thank you. I can't get it there yet. Thank you. Finally, I'm here.
No worries. Well, you have not missed much. We are just taking our time, and I'm using two colors today for my palette primarily. Using a cobalt blue and a teal, and we're doing basic outlines. And you can figure out how big or how small you want your sea glass to be. But Terry, you want different shapes for your sea glass. And if you wanted to get some painter's tape and kind of create a white frame around the outside, you could. But you're gonna use a small brush and you're gonna use a light blue. So mix some blue and white together and just do lots of different shapes. But one of the most important things is to leave space in between each of these shapes. So let me know if you have any questions as you're getting going, but you'll quickly pick up on our technique as a group tonight. We're using that light blue as a base color, and then we're using a little bit of a darker tone just to do a little bit of outlining along the way. Keeping the middle of these a little bit lighter. So we don't need to fill these in as a solid color. But we are doing different sizes and different shapes. And Terry, I do this is recorded, so take your time, and we can certainly follow up after with any questions. But I don't want anyone on this call to feel rushed tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Tonight's class is just about enjoying the process. All right. So, and we also have a couple of the teal rocks kind of filtered in. So I'm kind of looking down here, and I might want my next teal one visually to be down here. So it's kind of fun to think about, well, what do I want to put next and where? But you can also be sporadic, which I'm also doing, but what I'm adding and where. So again, playing with different tones of blue as an outline is good. Some pointed shapes, some rectangular shapes. You could do a couple of round ones. You know, I found far less round pieces of sea glass than I did others, other shapes, but you do you. I think I did a couple of round items. And I'm going to do, let's see, what shape do I want down here? I might do more of a rectangular piece down here for the teal. And I'm inspired to do another teal down here. So maybe it's a smaller, kind of funky style piece of sea glass. So if you wanted to do, you know, kind of plan out where you want some of the teals to be, you could just be sporadic. Like I just put another one down here just to see how it goes. And then we can do the inside a little bit lighter. It's all good. Again, everyone has their own process on how you get from point A to point C. I can tell you, my husband and I do things totally differently, but guess what? We learn a lot from one another. All right. And you can kind of, if you want to take a break on some of these, you can always kind of take a look up and say, well, do I want to modify or fill in any of these a little bit more? We are going to do more of that, but this is kind of a first coat for our base shapes. So we're not striving for detailed perfection right now. That is not the point we are at in our class. I'm getting a little more white. I'm running out of my light blue pretty quickly here. Take a couple deep breaths. Inhaling through the nose. And out through the mouth. Feels really nice. Do that a couple times. Do that 5 times. That'll make you feel really good. And again, maintain those white spaces. White is also our friend. If you need to add a little bit more white space in between things, don't worry about that. You can always do that at the end or halfway through here. And once we have all of our base shapes in, so if you are like not even halfway, keep on working your way down. I typically tend to go a little faster. I recognize that. But we are going to add in a lot more detail work in a few here. So I'm getting pretty close. I'm going to add in a couple of smaller pebble sized ones right down here. And just we're doing outlines, Terry, for who just joined. And then in the middle of these outlines, you can do a little bit like of a lighter color. So like we use the light blue to do a lot of these outlines. You can see I did some darker blue rings around with the main cobalt, but in the middle, you want it to be a little bit lighter. We're going to do more white kind of detailed work in the interior, but I'm just kind of guiding you if you wanted to do some lighter stones along the way, you could. So one of the things I wanted to mention as we're doing work around the edging, I'm not going to have any stones overlapping with the border. So I'm keeping a clean kind of padding around the entire edge. None of my rocks are touching the edges. So if you want to consider this, you can do your own thing. However, you can use a little bit of white paint if you have any rocks that are like overly, too close. White paint is a great solution for that. Just let that rock dry first before you try to do anything fancy to it. And I'm just adding a few of the blue, darker blue tones to some of this, just as fun aspect as we're painting along. You might notice areas like I have a big white space right here. I'm just going to add in a little pebble. So you might have areas as you're looking around, you might want to add in a little bit of a blue pebble here and there to fill a space. You could do that. Kind of fun. And your edges of your sea glass can be rounded, right? Some of my look a little bit edgy. I can always come in and round some of these corners to make it look like more like sea glass. But we can do that after too with a lot of the detailed work that we're going to do. So we're working on base shapes. Let's see here. I'm going to do, again, challenge yourself to do different styled shapes. This one's kind of an upside down heart. You could have rounded ovals. You could have circles. You could have rounded squares. You could have some with points. I'm going to put a couple of small kind of pebble-like ones in here. We know we all found those little ones as kids on the beach and even now, and I always wanted to find the bigger ones, but sometimes you'd find the little shards of sea glass all polished and beautiful. And I was like, oh, maybe I can find more. But maintaining that space, using the lighter blues, a little white, play with the different colors of your sea glass. And again, I'm going to lighten this. Some of this might seem really dark. I'm going to lighten it as a secondary part of today's class. So if you've taken my classes before, I always say, trust the process. You have to start somewhere. And some of you might be just using a lot more white up front. Again, everyone works differently. Totally fine. But lean back and say, well, what other shapes could I do that are a little different? I could do a longer, kind of skinnier one right here. Sometimes we get in the pattern of doing similar shapes, and it's good to just lean back in your chair and say, could I make something a little bit different here? Should I add in a small pebble just to break it up visually? Might have. Don't forget to stretch if you have any tea or water or even wine. Good for you if you're drinking wine. I will after tonight's class. Take a minute to hydrate, stretch a little bit. You're all doing wonderful. It's okay to take breaks as you go. I'm not a slave driver, imagine that. Clean off your brushes if you want a nice clean brush tip. You could switch brushes if you have a couple of other smaller brushes. I'm using a 2/0 brush, so if anybody's ever gotten one of those from me in one of our previous classes, that is what I'm using. I didn't get my fancy one in the car. I went to Michael's and I spent $5 whole on a fancy detailed brush for tonight's class, but I'll use it for something else. But look at that, I added a couple smaller stones. So fun. Don't overthink it. Let the sea glass forms come to you, but maintain the white space in between objects. So this inspiration is really a collage of all of our findings, ladies and gentlemen, from our beach vacation. How about that? We found all of this sea glass and we've created this collage to show off to our friends. Love it. And then again, a couple of extra tips. We're going to do more of this, but any of a darker tone you want to add around the edging, you could. Optional. I'm going to create more lightness, but it's always nice to have a little bit of a darker tone because you can always make it look more subtle with a little bit of white on top. But it's the shading. So when you put a dark tone around an object, you get a little bit of that depth. So if anybody's kind of coming near the bottom, you can always just take a minute. I'm actually running out of that darker blue, believe it or not. I have a little bit, and the lighting here is a little funky. So you can see this is the primary light blue I've been using for the shapes. And then this is a little bit darker. I was using a darker contrasting blue up here. That's where you can see this is like the kind of the primary cobalt. I am going to come in with white and I'll cover some of this up, but doing a little bit of outlining, even with this subtly darker color, you will be able to see it. Kind of outline your sea glass. You can refine the shape in this step. So I'm getting to the bottom. And I might start working my way up in a little bit, not yet, but we'll work our way up to refine shapes, add in a little bit of darker colors. So some of our next steps for awareness, so you pulling back the curtains, is we'll finish these base colors. Then we're going to do the darker tones first, where we want to add darker hues, and then we'll finish with our lighter tones. And along the way, we'll make sure you have enough of your teal sprinkled in. If you wanted to sprinkle a little bit of the green sea glass as well. But right now, finish those base shapes. And look at, I got distracted. I need to finish step one. It's tempting to get sucked into the details. So I explained some of them along the way because sometimes it's fun just switching it up and taking a little bit of a break. but it's also important to stay on track, at least for tonight's class, just so we can get through some of the basics, but you can continue to work on this after tonight's class if you wish. So again, I'm just adding a little irregularity here, some really different shapes. Again, you can do rounded, you can make them pointy. That one came out a little funny. You can just fix the edges a little bit. This one kind of looks like a banana. Put in a little bit of smaller stone here. But if you found sea glass, you know they come out in all shapes and sizes, that's for sure. Sea glass is an incredible thing, so beautiful. If anyone's inspired to do any of the yellow, you can put in a little bit of yellow rocks, or sorry, yellow sea glass. You could do that if you wanted. But most importantly, maintain that white space. And if you lost it in some areas, don't get discouraged. Don't worry about that. You can always go back in and add it. So like if some are a little too close, you can always just let it dry first. And then you can, oh, this is a nice triangular piece. I always love finding the triangular ones. Let the sea glass dry, and then you can go in and reshape it with white. If you do it now, it will get smudgy. So resist the temptation. So I'm kind of just finishing off. I love these little ones, really fun. And now we have some base sea glass to do something with. And I am going to lighten this up significantly, but it's good to kind of look around and anywhere you want, just to fill in some of your sea glass. You likely have done it along the way, but just take a look around, and anywhere you might want to add in a little bit more color, whether it's a lighter blue or a darker blue. I'm just kind of looking around a little bit. What we're going to do as our next step is we're doing the basic rocks first, or sorry, sea glass first. I keep calling them rocks, sorry. Basic sea glass forms first. Then we're going to work our way up the page, and we're just going to pay attention to the edging. So if you wanted to use this lighter blue for your edging, we're just going to kind of firm up the edging around each stone or each sea glass. So for me, I might make some of these a little more rounded, right? And then we'll go up doing that, and then we'll work our way down as our final step to lighten areas. And then we might add a little bit of darker contrast along the way. So for right now, get your basic shapes in. I am just going to, I have one or two more pieces. And then I'm just going to pay attention to the shapes of these stones. So it's just refinement to, if anywhere I want to round them a little bit more, I can round them a little bit more. Some of the edging might be a little rough. So for me, I'm switching, and you might have been doing this along the way. I'm doing it part along the way, but this is the refinement of the shape in itself. And I'm using the lighter blue to do this. I mentioned I'm going to go back in. These are going to be definitely a lighter tone. They're going to have lighter hues, kind of like a little bit of reflection. So I'm using a little bit of the lighter, but if you wanted to maintain any of the darker contrast, you could use some of the darker color. So you can choose which color is right for you. I might use a little bit of both. I personally like seeing the dark and the light on each stone. So as you're refining the shape, if you wanted to add in like a little bit of the secondary color of the darker, you could. But this is where we just enjoy the process. Try not to stick your finger in the paint like I just did. So I'm kind of working my way up from the bottom and I'm going to the left to the right just to refine the outline of each. So I'm rounding some of these corners for them to look more like sea glass. And if there's any questions along the way, please do not hesitate to ask. This is a time for you to have your own space and to paint with us, but also for me to help you in any way. We will do our first flip and reveal. I'll keep an eye on the clock. We'll do it at 6:30, so in 7 minutes. I'll let you all keep playing for a little bit here. So it's 6:30. We will check in with one another. If anybody wants to show off their work, they can. I'm certainly excited to see if anyone steered off the path of blues and greens. I'm sure some of you might have incorporated yellow. Maybe. But I'm just leaning back, and these rounded edges are really helping it. It makes it look more like sea glass for me. I don't know if anybody's there yet. And I'm still using this light blue for the corner rounding. Even on some of these darker ones, I'm using the light blue because I can still see the darker blue, which I really like. Really like seeing the two blue contrast. Some of you might be adding in a secondary color. If you haven't done that, I would suggest trying that. Maybe a challenge if you haven't painted in a long time, but try adding a secondary color to each piece of sea glass if you haven't done that already. Maybe it's a little bit of a darker blue. Maybe it's a little bit of a lighter tone in the middle. I'll let you decide. And I'm kind of outlining each piece of sea glass. So they all have nice rounded corners, rounded, clean edges. And you may not want to do this exact step. However, that's okay. Nice and clean against the white. I'm doing just my blue right now. I have not touched my green ones. I'm going to do all the green ones at the same time. And as you're painting, I mentioned earlier, I'll be doing a free class in July as well. I'll be picking the date tomorrow, hopefully. And if you are inspired to paint anything in particular, please feel free to drop it in the chat or shoot me a message. But I host one free class every month, no cost to you. Some of us don't always have extra cash to paint, so I always love offering a free class to the artist community to have some fun. And if anyone ever needs supplies, feel free to shoot me a message. I'm happy to send you some nice supplies at a really reasonable rate, or you can get them on your own. Either way. But I'm working on the outline. 4 minutes until our first flip and reveal. Don't get nervous. We are very excited to see how you're doing. If you make any boo-boos, which we all will, let it dry before you put white on it. That's my best advice there. But I'm kind of just looking from the left to the right to figure, okay, where have I missed a darn piece of sea glass that needs a little extra love from the edge, the rounding edge, a nice clean painted line. Some of you were probably more meticulous when you painted these initially, which is, again, everyone's process is different. Some of these are fine the way they are. Some need a little extra love. All good. And I'm using that same brush, but just know as the artist, you can always switch brushes when you want. Sometimes it's good to get into a groove and using a certain one if you're doing detailed work, but it's always okay to switch too. So I remind people of that because if you don't paint that often, you forget that you can switch brushes. But the more you paint, you are more conscious and mindful that you can switch brushes if you want to. And if you need your pinky finger to help balance your hand on your canvas, you can do that too. I use that. As long as my pinky doesn't go into blue paint, that'll be all right. All I'm doing, ladies and gentlemen, is just outlining these so there's a nice, clean, rounded edge. For me, sea glass is rounded. Doesn't need to be in yours, but that's just how I'm inspired to take this on for tonight. Just doing a little bit more cleaner edging, and I am using the light blue. So we're at 6:29. Keep an eye on that clock. Accountability here. Keep on painting. Take a couple deep breaths. Don't forget to enjoy anything you may have near you for hydration. Don't drink the water cup. And again, I'm going to add white or some lighter tones on top of my sea glass to really brighten it, to make it look a little bit more coastal. Another way if you ever want to try this, is that this inspiration could also be completed using watercolor. So it's always fun to use watercolor to create different tones and hues to really move the pigment around. It's always something you can try in the future. Okay. We are at 6:30. So I'm going to remove spotlight. And I'm going to put the gallery view on in that top right-hand corner. If anyone is interested in showing off your work, we would love to see it. You could turn on your video. If not, I certainly understand. But we always love sharing our work. We typically get inspired from one another as we share our work. You might be like, Megan, I don't know what I'm doing. It just is what it is, and that's okay. Oh, Susan, lots of colors. Very cool. Susan, I love the colors. Love them. Thank you for sharing. Susan got all those colors right. So Susan, you used 4 or 5 different colors. I love it. There's Miss Terry. Terry, great start. Terry just went for it. I like it. Oh, there's Miss Maggie's. Maggie, beautiful. Maggie, I feel like I'm at the ocean. You and Terry, goodness gracious, you guys nailed it. Perfect. Oh, Amanda. All right, Amanda's coming. Amanda, well done. Your shapes are perfect. Maggie, well done. I know you're still working on your shapes, so don't rush there. Miss Sue's thinking about it. All right. Thank you all for sharing. I always love that part. But I love that you're all doing something a little bit different. So I'm going to go ahead and go back, and I'm going to spotlight my window again. Again, this is a really great point. Just to take a little bit of a break, stretch. If you want to keep working, feel free to keep working. But it's really just to acknowledge our subject today. And sea glass is, it's a really lovely piece of nature that comes out of many things, right? But the form is, it's really special in my opinion, and it can be very calming to find sea glass. And I hope many of you have your own experiences and your own memories, but this will be a beautiful addition to your home, this piece of art that you can hang with pride. But I encourage you always in my classes to never feel rushed. Even though tonight's class may only be an hour and a half, or if we get to 2 hours, great. You know, we're just at about an 1 hour right now, but just take your time. Don't feel like you need to finish at any step in particular. The class is recorded, so if you ever need to go back and see how we add depth, you can go see that. If you ever want to see where we may be adding different lightning and highlights, you can go back and see that too. So no worries. So what I'll do is I'm going to give, everyone's at different stages. Susan's going to go in and fill all those pieces of sea glass, which is cool. Many of you are filling in your shapes. Some of you are still refining. Some of you did refining right up front. So that's perfect. So wherever you're at, keep on working. I'll spend another, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. We'll see how it goes before I get into the depth details. So we'll do a little bit of depth after like the shape refinement. So we use another next 5 to 10 minutes for the shape refinement, clean edges. And then we'll do a wave of the darker depth. And then we'll do a wave of our lighter depth, of our lighter tones. So that will be our steps for the remaining of the class as a little bit of a peel back behind the curtains. So don't feel rushed. You all are at perfect steps and stages where you're at. In any way you want to approach kind of refining the edges. Again, I started at the bottom and I've been working across left to right. But it's important that we take a few minutes to refine the shapes because our paintbrush can get a little crazy sometimes. Imagine that. Awesome. So I'm just finding my teals. And I am just working on the outlines of my objects and maintaining the padding in between. And welcome Jamie, who just joined. We are really, we're picking our 2 or 3 tones. You can decide what color sea glass you want. And we added lots of sea glass, kind of started at the top and worked our way down, different shapes, different sizes, leaving padding in between each piece of sea glass. And trying to incorporate a lighter and a darker tone of color within each piece. So we're really just taking our time right now to refine the shapes. But the class will be recorded. So if anybody wants to come back in, and I will share the link to the recording for anyone that registered. If you did not register, I will share it on my Facebook page as well. But take your time in refining each of these pieces. And don't worry about the colors too much inside. If you don't have base colors in yet, you can add those in now. If you already have base colors, don't worry about those. We're gonna do our darkening depth step next. Anywhere you may want to add a darker tone, that will be our next step. But I'm just looking around each piece of sea glass to add a little bit of rounded, clean lines. And if you don't have to go really rounded, it's just making sure that the edging is the way that you want it to be. And that's our current step before we get into the fancy detailed work here. And the detailed work is going to take a little while, so I'm going to be mindful of time to show you that work. And again, you may not finish in the window of time we have tonight, but just know that's okay. You can continue working on this at your own pace. I'm just doing some nice clean lines. One excellent tip is make sure you have enough paint on your paintbrush as you're doing these rounded lines, as you're doing these helps give it a nice clean edge. There we go. And I'm doing all of my teal rocks that I have sprinkled around. And maybe I lean back and say, hey, do I want to add any more teal anywhere? Well, if you know me and you've taken these classes, I like teal a lot. So maybe I'll sprinkle in a little bit of teal on some of these blues. Might as well. So maybe I'll put a couple of teal touches in some of these. Ooh, a blended piece of sea glass. Imagine that. That's kind of cool. So I'm just doing a little touch of teal here and there. Again, I want it to be an accent, so I don't want to steal the thunder from my pretty blues. However, if I wanted to add just a little bit here and there, this is where you kind of lean back in your chair and you reflect on, does the color balance work for me? Do I have the blues that I want? Do I have the lighter blues? Do I have darker blue stones? There are darker blue stones in the inspiration, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. So we're going to do the darker wave first for our depth. So if you wanted to, and you could even do it now, if you want to add any stones to be a little darker, since we're going to do it darker next anyways, you can use that. So for me, my darker blue stones are the cobalt blue. I'm going to do some that have a little bit more of the cobalt. Now you can see there's some in the middle here, but I'm going to get a little daring, and I might add a little bit of that down here. And you can do it around the edging. You could mix this with a little bit of the blue. So for me, I'm gonna maybe look and see, well, where do I want some of the darker blue to come through? So if anybody wants to add any of a darker tone to any of your stones, maybe take a look around. Doing a little bit of an outline, maybe one side of the rock, of the sea glass, excuse me, would have a darker tone. You can just do a little bit of an outline. Maybe the top part would have a little bit of a darker blue. And if you don't like it, guess what? We can cover it up. It's okay to experiment a little bit. And these are the details that will really make our sea glass look more natural. So anywhere, as you're doing outlining, anywhere you might want to add a little bit of a darker tone, feel free. It could be along the edge. So we're doing edging, right? Could be along the edging. Go along the bottom and swoop up. This is where there's no right or wrong way of doing things. This is a great opportunity to experiment and try something new, because it's a safe zone. If you don't like it, you can paint over it and I can help you. But I like the darker accents. So I'm looking, okay, I have a little bit here, I have a little bit there. Maybe the bottom of this one will have a little bit of the darker tones, just gentle sweeps. I'm doing a gentle outline, maybe the bottom of this. So, and if I think it's too dark, well, I'm going to do the lighter tones in a little bit. I can just cover it up if I don't like it. So lean back, maybe every other rock, high and low. You could try adding a little bit of contrast. So this is really one of our next steps. You're welcome to start this whenever you're comfortable, but this is adding a little bit of shading as well. So if you want to add even an outline, so this is our depth technique as well. If you don't want to make a piece of sea glass darker initially, what you can do is grabbing some of that cobalt blue or the darker teal and doing a small outline on the underside. This is creating a shadow or a shade. You could do this on as many or as few of these as you wish. See the line I just did right there? The sea glass is jumping off of the canvas. So I could, ladies and gentlemen, on the underside or on the left side of each of these pieces of sea glass, do a very thin blue line. Look at that. And it makes it stand out just a little bit. So this is something that will really, this is like this takes a little patience. But I'm showing it to you for consideration. Any way you want to add depth, we're switching. Depth may be making some stones a little darker. That one just got a little darker. On the underside, maybe on the left side, and maybe it curls under just a little bit. I'll bring it a little closer so you can see it. See how there's little outlines, dark outlines under some of these. Imagine the details. So the details that we're doing is we're adding that wave of depth. Again, I'm starting from the bottom, working to the top, of adding a little bit of an outline, a darker outline on each object. And then we'll do a wave of the lighter depth, which is creating that highlight. And that's really the brightness that will include more so on top of the object, not on the outside of the object. So this is on the outside. And again, if you wanted to make some of these the sea glass a little darker, you can. I did that in several spots. You can have fun, just experiment. Do something you don't like, don't worry. And this is the type of detail that could easily make this class 2 hours long, 2.5. There's many artists that have classes that are 2.5 hours. And I like personally make a decision just to keep them at 2 hours as a max, just because I give you enough for you to get the concepts and for you to consider some of the fine details. Because sometimes we don't all always have 2.5 hour chunks, especially right around dinner time. So just take a couple deep breaths, and I'm just doing basic outlines around some of these. You may not want to do all of them. I'm going to do most of them because I like the way it looks. And I know I'm going to come in with some white. So again, you do what feels right for you. That's the most important part. And I'm doing all my blue sea glass first, and then I'll use the teal, the true teal, to do the teal sea glass. And I'm using a nice fine pointed brush. And on some of these, I might be doing the left side and curling it to the underside of the sea glass. It really grounds the object. And I'm doing a very thin line. And there's a lot of objects. So don't feel rushed. Just kind of do a left and right, kind of work your way. Again, I'm kind of working my way up, and I still miss some. So I'm kind of just doing a scan. It's good to stay organized. And when you're doing details like this, so you don't miss one. You'll typically miss one. It's all good. You don't need to do full outline. You could just do little parts too. You could just do maybe a little top here around the bend, maybe a little bit on the back side. It's okay to do different areas of your depth. There we go. Maybe I'll do this side a little bit. Again, stretch your shoulders. If your shoulders are hunched over, stretch them back. Push your shoulder blades back just to stretch. I don't know anyone who has good posture when they paint. Maybe if they taught that in art school, maybe some of you are doing that. My posture is not so good when I paint, probably because I'm my setup could be a little different. Maybe some of you are sitting up straight and you're in good shape. Don't forget to smile. You're having fun. If there's any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm so glad you're here with us tonight. Again, we're going to do some white flushing. So we're going to lighten some of this, but we're doing this depth work. And gosh, can you see the difference, right? So if I take a piece of paper and I cover the bottom, or I cover the top, you can see the detailed work. Now, if I cover the bottom, you can see the difference with the edging, the depth edging. Really brings those objects off the page. There's less of this in the inspiration. However, I wanted to incorporate it. It was important for me to incorporate tonight. Again, if you don't want to do all of this, you do not have to. You can switch to the light. So I'll be mindful of time. I'll give everyone at 7 o'clock at the top of the hour, I'll switch to do the lighter tones. And we'll try to wrap up around 7:15, just to be mindful of folks' time tonight. So we'll do this for another 5 or 10 minutes. If anyone is ready for me to switch to do the lighter, please let me know. I'm happy to shift. Many of you are either in the groove or starting this soon. Maybe if you're not starting this soon, that's okay too, right? Going at your own pace is okay, but we're adding the shaded accent to our sea glass. And then we'll make them all a little bit lighter. But this is where you can also play with the colors that are inside as well. So for me, I know I have all my base colors in. I'm now just gonna brighten some of these pieces of sea glass. I'm gonna create them to be a little bit lighter. So that's my intent for next steps. You may see a piece of sea glass you did not outline, like me. Oopsie, missed one. Grab some of the lighter color, go in and round those edges, make it a nice clean edge. Okay. I'm gonna do a quick look around here, make sure I got all the edges. I got excited about the details. Imagine that. Enjoy the process. This piece of sea glass needs a little love. I'm sure you have one that needs a little love. You can reshape it. You can change the colors. The possibilities are endless. Well, this one up here needs a lot of love. It's a little rigid. The first one I painted in that corner. Let's fix that right up. If you happen to dip your finger in your paint and get a little smudge, it happens. Let it dry, don't touch it, but then you can touch it up with some white paint, but maybe clean your finger off. You can use your pinky to balance your hand for any of this detailed work. I've heard it works for some, not for others. So I take that with a grain of salt if it doesn't work for you. Okay. So I'm just fixing some of my edging, and then I'm going to go back to doing the darker highlight, the darker shading. But what a big deal. What a big difference. And if you decide that you don't, excuse me, if you decide you don't like this dark, you can always go in and cover it up. It's no big deal. No problem at all. And I haven't done my dark teal yet, so I'll do that next. But right now I'm just finishing up the darker shading for some of the blues. You don't need a lot. Again, if you don't want to do all of this, you don't have to. But for me, I'm trying to be consistent about what I'm doing and where. And this follows suit with some of the edging details. So if you have enough paint on your brush, you'll have a nice, smooth, clean brush stroke. You don't need a lot of paint. Many of you have likely figured that out with this detailed work. Filling in and doing the basic shaping takes a little bit. But kind of lean back and run your eye from the bottom to the top and say, did I miss any? You can kind of work your way left to right. I'm going to do my teal sea glass in a minute, but I'm kind of working my way around. Oh, I forgot one right here. And you can say, am I happy? Am I happy with the colors? Do I want to make any more modifications? And then I'm just going to keep working my way up until I'm happy with the darker tones. Some of you might want to do more lighter tones. Now, Miss Susan, you're doing 5 different colors of rocks. You're going to have a darker tone of each of those 5 colors, which is going to be really cool. Unless you want to just do all lighter tones, and you can decide that. Either is fine. For me, I'm doing a little bit of the darker because then I'm going to do the flush of working from the top down with just a little bit of lighter accents here and there. But you get to choose what you want to do, which is quite nice. And I'm getting pretty close with these darker accents. If anyone has any questions or needs help, please let me know. You can unmute if you need anything. I'm just going to switch to the darker teal, which is just my teal out of the box. This is my darker tone. Because I used white and teal to make the teal sea glass. Again, don't forget to stretch. Don't forget to enjoy your water, wine, tea, whatever you may have. And if you wanted to take a break to go grab something, we'll be right here waiting for you. You can take a break. You could also, if you're watching this video, you could also pause it. But it's good to take care of yourself as you do these classes, whether it's hydration or food or stretching. A little bit of mindfulness for what we need along the way is important. All right, I'm going to do a little bit of this teal on the underside. And if it's not dark enough for your taste, you can add a little bit of black to it and really make a pop. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use it as is. And you can also work on your edging for your any teal sea glass that you might have, or your whatever your secondary color is. If you don't have a secondary color, that's all right. Some of you might have done, darker blue, teal, darker blue sea glass. Some of you might have done a lighter blue sea glass pieces. I have a little bit of a mix. I have a little bit of a mix. But it's nice to being able just to manage the shape of these objects for the way that you want it to be. It's kind of nice. And I'm just doing a little bit of a touch of an exterior line on maybe the side. Maybe it runs along the bottom. And you can round some of these with a darker shade by just kind of doing some extra interior swiping to make something a little bit darker of a contrast. A little bit more shading. You can bring it rounded around the interior like this, sweeping it in just a little bit. Because you can always cover it up or soften it with the white, which is our final step. And we're doing great on time. I said 7 o'clock, we were going to switch to doing the lighter. I am pretty close to that. Some of you may not be, it's okay. Absolutely okay. And again, some of your pieces of sea glass, they can be a combo. They can be a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Okay, these things happen in the ocean. All right, so again, quick look, you're making sure the edges are all nice and clean. Okay. So give everyone a minute just to kind of check yourself on where you're at. I'm going to grab some water, stretch my back a little bit, and transition to doing the lighter accent on top. Clean my brush off really well. And I have a nice kind of clean dollop of white on my plate. And it's the size of my pinky nail. It is not very much paint at all. Okay, so this is really quite fun, this next step. Now, if you're going to join me in this next step, I encourage you to, wherever you're going to do this work, the sea glass should be fairly dry. If it's not 100% dry, that's okay. But this is where I want you to figure out, like, where do you want to add a little bit of like lightness to your stones? So there's a couple ways you can go about lightening your stones up. You could take a tiny bit of white. Look at that, teeny, teeny, teeny. And you can start to lighten some stones or some of these sea glass. So I could just brush a little bit of the white on and just really move it around. Small brush strokes on the surface of the sea glass and just softening the darker colors. And I'm doing it on the edge where there is the dark, it's opposite of the darker contrast. So I'm doing gentle sweeps to just ever so slightly blend in the white. And I'll bring this a little closer. This is the one I was doing right here. I'm just gently bringing it in, gentle sweeps. And I'm kind of maintaining some of the darker edges. And I'm making the middle just a little lighter. So if I did this much detail on every stone, we'd be here forever. But I want to show you what the example is. So maybe pick a few stones. And again, I'll spend 15 minutes kind of showing you some of this detailed work. I'll pick a blue one, maybe over here. And I'm just going to do a couple little dots of white. I'll bring it a little closer, sorry. A couple little dots of white. And I'm just gently sweeping it on. Now, I don't want it to cover all the blue, so I'm being mindful to kind of move it out ever so slightly. Now, this is a little too dark up here. If you wanted to put a little bit of water on your brush, you could. If you wanted to use your finger to smudge, you could. But this is where you can kind of manage where you want to add some highlighting or some lighter spots. I may put a little water on my brush, not so it's drippy, but taking some of this and moving it around. And a little water will really help move the pigment as well. And you can literally move it all the way around. You might want to cover up some of the darker blue. That's okay. It's okay to cover up something that you just did. And see that I softened it. See how it's softer? That's, I put a little tiny bit of water on. I'll pick another one to do. This one's pretty dark right here. Maybe I'll soften this one a little bit. So I have little bit of brush, and at the top, I'm going to do a couple 3 dots, and I'm just going to gently sweep down. Maybe dip just the tip of the brush in the water. Make sure there's no droplets, and then you can slowly kind of bring down round. Slowly just soften your sea glass. Now, if the bottom is still too dark, guess what? You can bring a little bit of this white down. And I just softened it ever so slightly. So you can play with this. You can soften certain parts of sea glass. You could do little bits. So I'm gonna look at each piece of sea glass for what it is. A little water, and I might just do parts and move it around. Move. This one has a little bit. You can use your finger to smudge. Anywhere you want to create a little bit of brightness. For me, I'm just going to do a kind of a little bit of a lighter wash on about a third of these. So I'm being thoughtful to just mix in a little bit of lighter sea glass, like a lighter blue of a sea glass. So I'm just doing bits and pieces here and there. So this one right here may need a little bit of love. I might soften some of this blue. Again, a little bit of water, a little bit of paint on my brush. You can go all the way to the edge if you want. You don't have to keep that dark edge, but it's there on the underlying coat for you to see. So sometimes it's good to have something there as another point of realism. So it's a little dark over here. You can cover it up a little bit. But so the white adds a little bit of texture and a little bit of brightness. So I'm kind of going back and forth, a little bit of paint, a little bit of water. And maybe do every other stone. You could do every third piece of sea glass. Use your finger to smudge. Play with this a little bit. You can use a paper towel if you want to use a corner of a paper towel. For me, I'm just creating a little bit of softness here and there. So the water will help make the paint pigment less obtrusive. It kind of softens it because I like to see the blues underneath. But the nice thing about the water is you can see all the textures and all the work you spend on all the blues on the underside. It's kind of nice. But you can still see the depth work that you just did as well. So it's nice to have the mix. So you can see, I did probably 4 pieces of sea glass on the top. You can see it's significantly lighter in areas. So it's like a tiny, tiny bit of paint. You don't need much at all. Then I dip my brush in the water cup, and then I kind of wipe off the drop of water on the top. And then I find a piece of sea glass I just want to lighten ever so. Maybe it's around the top, maybe it's around the bottom. It might be one of these teal ones. I just want to dim it down just a little bit. You can go all the way off to the edges too. You don't have to keep the dark edge if you don't want it. See, this is the frosty look that we see on sea glass, right? Some of you may have already thought that in your head and I just didn't say it, that this is the frosty look that sea glass has. And if anyone has the science behind sea glass that you'd like to share with us, we are all ears. However, if you don't, we can continue painting. And if you're watching this video on our YouTube channel after and you know the science, I encourage you to reply in the comments below and share the science with us. It's always fun to share facts along the way. But for me, ever so slightly, I'm going to soften. So I had a lot of just blue and dark blue of these beautiful sea glass. I'm just going to soften some of the blue. Again, some of it might go to the edge, some of it may not. You might want to add this frosting to all of yours. You could, totally up to you. I'm here to offer you different tips and tricks and suggestions. But this is working quite well. If anyone has any questions or needs any help, please don't hesitate to ask. But I'm using a little water and a little bit of paint to ever so slightly create a little bit of this brightness, a little bit of this frost on the tops of some of these. And if you want to touch every piece of sea glass, you could. I am moving that way. Just a little bit of this lightness, even if you don't cover the whole thing or part of it, even a little bit of the lighter frost. And even in one area, even if it's a darker piece of sea glass, do a small part of this with a little bit of the frost, just to see what happens. It will brighten, but it'll also complement all the work that you've already done as well. And the water will help give you that texture. And I'm just doing gentle sweeps. And I'll do another one up close so you can see it. So a little water on my brush, a little bit of paint. And I'll do this blue boring one right here. So I'm just going to gently sweep a little bit this down and around the edges. And just eyeball it. I want you to feel satisfied with the texture you're creating. You don't need to fill the whole in like you're in a coloring book. See how you can see some of the darker contrast? You can see the base blue. It's all about experimenting, and it takes practice. So if you're saying, Megan, mine do not look like that, don't worry. It takes practice playing with this water trick. It takes practice learning how to just incorporate different colors in different ways. But you're all doing such a great job. And most importantly, I hope you're enjoying yourself and you're having fun. That's why we're here. And for me, I wanted to kind of have a lot of this blue, and I wanted to really soften some of these. So for the remaining, we have about 5 minutes left for tonight's class. But I wanted to soften some of these kind of darker areas. Just a little bit. I like seeing the contrast, but I want a healthy balance of this frosting look, this frosted look. So it's kind of just for me, it's about being mindful of saying, okay, well, where do I want to add this? So I could eyeball this and say, okay, well, there's a little bit of green here. I want to add a little bit of this opacity, just a little bit on top. And if you don't like something, you can kind of smudge it with your finger. Look at that. And smudging is a great frosting technique. Look at that. It's just a brief cover now of this white opacity. And just work your way around and down. Again, no rush. Some of you are still probably filling in those stones or those sea glass. Sorry, I keep calling them stones. Some of these look like stones to me. Nice. And you can use your finger to smudge. Don't ever hesitate to get a little messy. But you can see I did a lot more of like the frosting, that lighter highlighted look on the top compared to the bottom. So this is a great example of what the white looks like on top of the stone, on top of the sea glass versus the bottom half. The bottom half is kind of flat colors. It's flat blues and flat greens with the darker contrast, right? So everything's a process with regards to adding depth to an object. So it's a good example of the darker depth on the bottom, and then the top is the darker depth with some of the frosted highlight on top. So just know that your art is always going to evolve, and some of you may or may not be interested in all these details, and that's okay. But I'm here to offer you different tips and tricks and to give you different ways of approaching painting objects like this. And the more water you add, the softer this will appear. And you can use your finger to smudge. You can put a little bit of this paint on and use your finger to kind of smudge around. That's okay. You're going to find a technique that works for you. And you'll figure out how much you want to add this frosted look. It's kind of nice seeing some of the color, but doing some of this frosted highlight to really bring the object to life. And a little bit of water helps tremendously. If you feel like that paint pigment is too white, add a little bit more water to your brush. You can use a paper towel. And you can see that that lighter really starts to create that highlight of this top surface. Now I have some of mine up here. They have, I'm being a little critical, but there's some like white in the middle of some of these. If anybody wants to kind of, if you have any white on the interior, you can kind of come in with your lighter blues and just touch up and fill some of that in if you don't want any white spots. This is just me reflecting on what I had. So you can kind of fill in if any of you have white spots in the middle, you can kind of fill it in a little bit. Might make it look a little more natural. In the picture, there's very few of those white spots. The sea glass typically doesn't have white in the middle of them, but I was doing it just to hold the brightness for our eye. So if you wanted to come in with like the lighter blue, you kind of fill some of those in, you're welcome to. Even after you frosted it a little bit, it's okay. I'm just being mindful of coming in and just filling in some of, if there's any big white spots, I'm just going to kind of come in and touch it up a little bit. There we go. Everybody's doing great. We are at 7:15. I am not done my frosting yet. I will take a few minutes just to finish that. I understand if anyone has to leave, but I'm here. I'm going to finish my bottom frosting and highlights with the water and the white paint. Otherwise, it may never get done in my household. But feel free to unmute yourself. If anybody wants to share your work, feel free. I'd love to see your progress. I will remove the spotlight on my screen. Many of you are in progress, and I absolutely understand that, but I'm going to switch to gallery view. If anyone wants to show off their work or even unmute to share what your thoughts were about tonight's inspiration, if it was a good change, if it was hard or easy, I'd love to hear your feedback. Ooh, there's Miss Terry's.
Oh, I thought it was great fun. I enjoyed it. I'm not finished yet, but it was great fun.
It's really nice. I love
Thank
yours.
you.
I love it, Terry. Thank you so much for sharing your feedback. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I thought it was different.
Yeah.
So this is mine, not finished.
Ooh, I love your blues and greens. Some darker
Yeah.
colors and yellows.
I'm not finished, but I seem to be very into it. I can tell because, and I think the rest of the class too.
Yeah.
Absolutely nobody was asking questions.
Yeah.
It was just so quiet.
Yeah. Well, I knew it, Terry. It's so, or not Terry, it's Susan. I knew it was going to be quiet tonight. And I was like, because this is where everybody's working on like their own shapes and like their own ways of incorporating colors. And like, that is a really good thing sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's okay to hold space for people to do that. So agreed. But you did lovely. I'm glad you incorporated lots of colors. I actually was gonna do that because I go to a lake and there's a lot of beautiful like reds and browns and grays. And I was gonna paint that. And I was like, well, I probably should stick with my blues and greens tonight. So I was pleasantly surprised to see your multi-toned sea glass. So cool. But you can do
Thanks.
stones, right? So it's the imagination really going for it. So
Yeah.
I applaud you for that. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your feedback. I really appreciate it. All right. So for me, I'm just taking a look around and saying, well, where else do I want to add this frosted appeal, this lighted highlight? I'm just doing a little bit of an accent even on some of these. It doesn't need to be the entire thing. And you might notice you might need a little darker contrast on some items. Like this poor, lonely little piece of sea glass didn't get any of the dark blue contrast. Heavens forbid I left him out of the club here. But I teach these techniques of depth in nearly all my classes, but they show up in different ways. And we spend more time on them in different ways. And tonight's class, we spent a lot of time because it's a big part of really bringing these objects to life. And I applaud you all for trying it and being courageous. It's an important piece. And just know we're using acrylic paint. Maybe you're using a different medium, but it dries quickly. So if you need to make any modifications, you can add more paint, you can add more layers. And a little bit of the frosted goes a long way. All right. Well, I want to thank you all again for joining. If there's any follow-up questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I am here to answer any follow-up questions now, but you're welcome to contact me through my website, which is paintandsipvt.com. My email is Megan, MEAGAN @paintandsipvt if you want to shoot me an email. But I hope you all enjoyed yourself tonight, and I applaud you for slowing down and trying out a really detail-oriented inspiration with me. I will be sharing the video. So if anyone requests that, Jamie, happy to get that to you. I will post it in the Facebook invite as well as any private requests. But thank you again for being here, and I hope to see you all again soon. Take care.
Thanks, Megan.
Of course. I'm just going to grab Jamie's email really quick. All right, I got that. Thank you all again. Take care.